You know, when you see a sizzling plate of Korean barbecue, you're probably just thinking about how delicious it's going to be. But what if I told you that the story of this one dish, it's not really about food. It's about rebellion, it's about power, community, and believe it or not, it's about what makes us human. All right, let's get into it. A million years. I know what you're thinking. That sounds a little intense for a plate of grilled beef, right? But the connection is absolutely real. How on earth could a simple recipe for fire meat unlock a story that goes all the way back to the dawn of our species? Well, to find the answer, we have to start not at the beginning, but with a really fascinating puzzle. So we're going to jump in our time machine to the Joseon Dynasty in Korea, which, by the way, lasted for over 500 years. This was a time that was defined by a very strict, very important rule, and a whole lot of people who were absolutely determined to break it. Okay, so you have to understand, in a society built on farming, a cow wasn't just an animal, it was basically a living tractor, a crucial piece of national infrastructure. People used to say a single cow could do the work of almost 10 people in the fields. So, to protect the kingdom's food supply, the government made killing a cow a very serious crime. And yet, look at this number. By the 1700s, it's estimated that more than 1,000 cows were being killed for food every single day in the capital alone. This was a combination of a few licensed butchers and, you guessed it, a massive black market. The law was a hard no, but the people's appetite was a screaming yes. And what's so wild is just how hard the government tried to stop this. Seriously, this wasn't some law they just forgot about. Over 5 centuries, they declared the ban 22 separate times. King Taejo had people flogged and exiled. King Sejong started a whole reward system for snitches. They even launched a campaign to get people to eat pork instead. It was a total bust. The craving for beef was just too deep, too powerful to be legislated away. So how did everyone get away with it? Well, with a loophole that is just genius. You were allowed to butcher a cow if its leg was broken and it couldn't work in the fields anymore. And what do you know? All of a sudden, an epidemic of broken-legged cows just swept the nation. This quote from a scholar at the time just perfectly sums up the whole sarcastic situation. Everybody knew exactly what was going on. So this raises the big question. Why? Why this unstoppable obsession with beef? Why risk getting flogged and exiled for this one particular food? The answer isn't in some dusty Joseon law book. It's actually coded deep inside our own evolution, going all the way back to the very first time our ancestors ever gathered around a fire. All right, we're hitting rewind now, way, way back. Because the story of Bulgogi is, at its core, a story about fire, meat, and that incredible moment when our ancestors stopped just eating and started cooking. And that one little change, well, it changed everything. So, at the center of all this is this powerful idea called the cooking hypothesis. And it basically argues that cooking wasn't just another cool invention, like the wheel or something. Nope. It was the invention, the one thing that literally sculpted our bodies and our brains into what they are today. It works like this, and it's actually a beautifully simple chain reaction. First, you start cooking your food. That makes it way easier to chew and digest, which means your body spends a lot less energy just breaking it down. So now you've got all this extra energy, and it had to go somewhere. And it went straight to powering a bigger, more complex, more energy-hungry brain. Cooking literally fed our minds. And you can see the results right here. It was a huge evolutionary trade-off. We traded in our massive jaws, our big teeth, and our long guts that we needed for raw food. And in return, we got the one thing that truly sets our species apart, this giant, super powerful brain. We literally evolved to be the creatures who cook. And we know this story starts in an incredibly long time ago. We have evidence from places like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa that suggest our ancestors were controlling fire as far back as 1,000,000 years. But fire didn't just change our bodies, it completely changed our society because it let us conquer the night. Now, this is so fascinating. An anthropologist named Polly Weissner studied modern hunter-gatherers to see how fire changes what we talk about. During the day, conversations are mostly practical: work, where to find food, a little gossip. But at night, around the campfire, 80% of the conversation switches to storytelling, myths, and singing. The campfire became the world's first theater, the first classroom. It was the birthplace of culture itself. Okay, so let's bring it all together. Let's connect these two massive stories, this deep evolutionary pull we have towards cooked meat and the fire that brings us together, and connect it back to the specific history of Korea's forbidden food. You see, the tradition of grilling marinated meat in Korea is ancient. You can trace its family tree from Maekjeok, a simple skewered meat from an early kingdom, to the much more sophisticated Nanrohoe, or stove meetings, where Joseon nobles would gather to grill together. And that, eventually, in the 20th century, becomes the dish we all know as bulgogi. It's a straight line from an ancient campfire to a modern restaurant table. But you have to remember, because beef was so rare and so valuable, it was never just food, it was a ritual. It was the most important offering in ancestral rites. And then, sharing that sacred food, a practice called iumbuk, was how the whole community could share in that blessing. How many cows you served at a feast, that was a direct measure of your family's power and generosity. And what part of the cow you ate showed exactly who you were. The royals and the elites, they ate dishes like niobiani, which is basically the great-great-grandfather of modern bulgogi, made from the best, most tender cuts. Regular people, on the other hand, got the tougher cuts and the innards, which they became absolute masters at slow cooking in delicious soups and stews. The entire animal was used, but how you ate it said everything about your place in the world. Which brings us to this absolutely incredible fact. For thousands and thousands of years, rice was the undeniable center of the Korean diet. It was everything. But in 2023, for the first time in recorded history, Koreans ate more meat per person than rice. The forbidden food, the food of kings, the food of ritual, has now become the everyday staple. The journey is complete. So, the next time you're gathered around a grill, or even just your own dinner table, think about this. That simple act of sharing cooked food connects you to a tradition that's 1,000,000 years old. It's an echo of those very first campfires that literally made us who we are. It really makes you wonder, what deep, ancient stories are we all retelling every time we just share a meal?